Well, welcome to another episode of Rimshots for Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. I'm here with a gentleman who I kind of discovered by accident. A friend of mine gave me one of his novels, and anybody that knows me, you make a joke that I don't know how to read, which is 100% not true. Dan Padavona, all the way from just outside of Binghamton, New York, which a lot of people up here will know. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, a couple things, and I told you in the intro, I don't typically research, but I did a little bit of research, and one of the things, the first thing I find about you is you and I are very, I guess, close in age, but you're a bit of a late bloomer to the game. I mean, I'm guessing that you always had a like or a love for the written word and what you're doing, but you're a bit of a late bloomer in terms of getting started. Is that a fair statement?
That's a very fair statement. I read most of my life, fell away from it a little bit during the first years that I was working, and just a little bit overwhelmed by the career, I guess. But I embraced a love for writing early on, like in high school. Got away from that as I moved into college, and writing became more of a chore. And then I re-embraced it later in life. It was, let's see, 2014. So that would have made me 44, 45 years old at the time. And just out of the blue, I decided that I needed to write. And, people talk about, messages coming to them and kind of setting them on a different path in life. And this message came to me very strong, and I listened to it, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions in my business life. That's for sure.
So it's interesting because, like I say, you and I are very close in age. You're maybe a year older than me. And when we were growing up, we didn't grow up in the '60s. We were kind of born in the '60s or the tail end of the '60s. But we would always hear the term "don't trust anybody over 40." Here you are, 44 years of age, really starting a new career. So I guess the message I get from that is you can do anything at any age if you really set your mind to it.
Yeah, and I sure hope that life isn't almost over at 40 and 50. But yeah, we certainly can do anything we want at any given age. And from being around music and seeing what the Rolling Stones are doing right now on their final tour. I mean, you can go for a long, long time in just about any industry, outside of like athletic competition. So yeah, I mean, as long as I have my faculties about me, there's no question that sw making such a midstream switch in the middle of my life was not only possible but necessary, and I'm really thriving because of it. Just having readers now and having people who say such nice things about my books. It's so different than the previous career I was in, and it lends a lot of happiness to my life that probably wasn't there before.
Well, in your previous career, you're a meteorologist for what, over 20 years. We won't make any jokes about that. They probably even done. I'm
Ha.
a drummer, so I've heard enough drummer jokes to last a lifetime. But Brian Keene, who anybody that knows, because I picked this off of I believe it was your website, but he said one of the most exciting writers to burst on the scene in some time. And so there you are, 44 years old, and you get that from in your industry, a legend. I guess it has to fire back to you that I'm maybe doing the right thing here.
Yeah, it probably was like a wake up call because at the time I was writing some horror. I hadn't discovered my love for thrillers yet. And Brian, out of the blue, had contacted me on Twitter and befriended me, and that that was a shock because who he was. But we became pretty good friends after that, and he wanted me to come onto his podcast, and it just seemed like we could never make the time work quite right. But we were doing an event together, a book signing event in Massachusetts, and he thought that that would be a great opportunity to record the podcast in between sessions. And that was like the first thing he said. That was how he introduced me onto his podcast. And I was kind of dumbstruck as he said it. And, if Brian says something, nice about another author, it's not about the rub. It's just about, how it feels to you. That's like, somebody who you deeply respect, showing you that you belong. And I think I became a lot more serious about my craft, after that podcast interview.
Another quote, and it's by you, and I took a part of it, and the reason why I took it, I'll share it with you in a second. But you basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase here as I'm looking at my notes. Uh, when you read one of my books, I want you to feel like you were sitting around a campfire with me. And that resonated with me because I started my podcast was a COVID thing. I couldn't be playing music, and I knew some local musicians, decided to start interviewing them. And my whole thing was, we're just sitting at a bar, having a beer, nothing preconceived, and we're just chatting. And I was like, I got that vibe from that quote. And now it's part of a longer quote, but just explain that because there's just something really cool that, you take it seriously, but you don't take yourself too seriously.
Well, you know what? I think it speaks more to the way I try to tell stories and the way that I imagine the reader with me. It's more of an approach thing. So, going back to my childhood, my favorite storytelling moments were, us just, sitting on a dark night, maybe out on my porch or around a campfire, somewhere, and trying to scare each other with little tales. And, back then, we're about the same age. So, I can remember watching the Salem's Lot TV miniseries, and we were all just completely engrossed and terrified by the whole ordeal. And we'd tell each other stories about it when we'd sit alone in the dark, and it was just kind of a game to try to scare each other. But even then, when I was probably I wasn't a teenager yet. I was probably only 10, 11 years old, but there was still already a feeling inside me that when I was telling a little story, I would want to kind of place the other person in the situation and add to the intensity of the moment, kind of make them feel where they were. And that's something that stayed with me my entire life. And now that I'm writing stories for a living, it's something that I try to do with, pretty much every chapter I write.
A little tip for you. So I got out of the going to movie theaters, and then I recently started liking it again. I saw The Watchers on the weekend. I don't know if you've seen that movie yet.
No.
You and I set this up last week, and I saw the movie, and I said to the person that I'm with, "Is like this could be a Dan book." I mean, it's so I won't give away anything, but if you get a chance, go check it out. You mentioned making a living from doing what you're doing, which is great. And everybody knows in this day and age, the arts, which I would consider, what you do, it gets harder and harder in the arts to make a living. I read something about the author's mindset and how you talk to people and mentor people with that. Would you explain that concept for my viewers and listeners?
Yeah, every time that I meet a writer who is overwhelmed by the prospect of either just getting to the point of writing a book, even putting some words on paper, or maybe they have written several books, but they've not found readers. I find that it all comes down to mindset. In fact, I think just about everything in our lives, comes down to mindset. So yeah, I try to instruct people to break things down into little manageable bits. So when I first decided that I was going to write a book, the concept completely overwhelmed me. I mean, I'm thinking in my head, Stephen King novel, which is, thick enough that you could kill somebody with it, and drop it
Yeah.
on their heads. So, how does someone come up with that many words, and how do you string that many words together and make sense and then tell a story with them? I'd never done anything close to that before. So I began with researching just little things like, how many pages are in a normal book? And, once I figured out a range of acceptable criteria for the number of pages, I started to ask the next question, how many words are on each page? And these are just little things that I could Google. I suppose now you could do it with AI. And as I started to put those figures together, I saw about how many words it would take to write a book. And then I broke that down because, 80,000, 100,000 words just, again, was very intimidating. But then I thought about it. Well, what if I wrote 1,000 words a day? Well, in 100 days, I'd have an entire novel written. And yeah, I've been into goal setting since I was in college. And I really feel like if you break things down into manageable goals, manageable tasks, they become a lot easier to attain. And you can do that whether it's writing a book or figuring out how to find readers or just, building any career. But it really does come down to mindset. You need to be positive. That's a big one. But you also need to break things down into manageable bites so that you don't overwhelm yourself before you start.
That's amazing. I would have to say that you took your own advice because I don't want to get this number wrong, but you have in or around 76 books. Is that correct?
If you combine paperbacks with Kindle, that is probably correct. I would think that the real number is probably about half that to maybe two-thirds of that.
It's still an incredible body of work for really, what are we talking, 10 years?
Yeah, I lose track sometimes and I have to like, slap myself across the face and say, I've written how many books? Because people will often ask me, how many books have you written? And I just kind of get a dumb look on my face. Not sure.
Well, I mean, if you compare it to music a band might put out an album every 2 years. I mean, just doing quick math, you're probably doing, two or three a year, which is, a torrid pace. And I mean, everybody knows everything that you do and not you, but everybody in general, everything isn't gold. So you've got an account too for the stuff that maybe you're writing that you're going, this isn't up to my standards and you have to start from scratch or maybe combine things. So I mean, that's a workload and a half, my friend.
Yeah, actually, I've been releasing in over the last year anyway, about one every 2 months. So about six a year. And you're right about that. And I don't want to be repetitive, and a lot of the stories, will follow similar themes. So what I will do is I will give myself a cushion, whereas I spend X amount of days writing the book, but then I give myself enough time to go back and make significant changes because I will realize after I've gotten so far into a book that maybe I'm repeating myself and I did something like this several books ago or maybe this just isn't quite either as tense as I want it to be, or the character building isn't quite at the level that I demand in my own writing. So I give myself time to go back, but then I also compartmentalize and I also spread out responsibilities so that not everything is on my shoulders. Once I am done with the initial draft and the first read over where I fix the obvious errors, at that point, it's out of my hands. I give that book to my editor, and my editor will then do the grunt work of finding other problems and then telling me, you kind of did something similar in a previous book. Maybe if you changed it up, and I always listen to her because she's very wise with her words. So if I have a team working with me and I don't have all these different things hanging on my head, I can actually produce 6 books a year, but I just do it by concentrating on me doing the writing, me doing the storytelling, and allowing everybody else to do their parts. So the editing, the book cover design, the audio book narration, I even like will have a company help me, build my mailing list, all those different things which could take up my writing time. They don't. So that's how 6 books a year becomes possible.
And as you're talking about your editor, and I started it as a music podcast, but I've added different sorts of things. When you say editor, I'm drawing a parallel between maybe a producer, right? Where you submit something and then like the episode of Seinfeld, there's too many exclamation marks in a sentence and they got to take those out. That process for you, how does it go? Like, was it initially hard to take feedback, or were you just open to feedback? And like, how does that work for you? Because everybody takes feedback differently.
Yeah, it was initially very difficult to accept feedback. And my first editor is actually my father-in-law, and he edited probably the first 6 or 7 books I wrote. They were all horror novels, and I hadn't really found myself yet. I had a voice which was starting to become distinctive, but I still was not the writer that I am today. But so much of who I became as a writer comes down to what he taught me. So those initial edits were very gruesome to look at. It was a lot of red ink and
Right.
a lot of, teaching, say it this way, get rid of the passive voice. You're repeating yourself here. You're getting way too wordy. And, in my head, I'm telling the best story that I can. And how dare anybody tell me that, this isn't perfect. How many books has he written, but, he's somebody I love and somebody I respect. So I'd have to slow down and say, okay, I'm going to take this advice, and I'm going to learn from it. And slowly but surely, my writing became a lot tighter. These days, it's more about either repeating something or just being too vague. I know what the plot is in my head, and sometimes I think that the readers do as well, and that's something that the editor will catch. So now these days, it really isn't something that bothers me so much. It's more like I'm going into it looking for that advice and looking for her to catch things that I know that I missed. And she's invaluable. I would put out a lot of pretty poor novels if it wasn't for her. So yeah, I take that advice to heart these days, and I don't feel like it's like somebody trying to change my art anymore. More so, it's somebody to save me from myself.
Shift gears a little bit, just a couple of the other parallels between yourself and myself that I picked up on. So you actually had a strong love for sports broadcasting, as I understand it, and used to do some when you were in college. This podcast started out as a sports show on community radio, so there you go.
Hmm.
You're a basketball fan, you're a hockey fan, you're a lacrosse fan,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
How much do you follow hockey? Because for my Canadian audience, obviously we're rabid hockey fans. Are you following the playoffs right now?
I have followed through the Stanley Cup Finals. I am not as huge a fan as I used to be, only because I write so often. I only have so much time to devote to the television. And I find that if I watch anything these days, it's like a sports talk show to keep me up to date with what's going on. Otherwise, there's just no way that I would be able to. Or I'll watch a lacrosse game, or maybe I'll catch a little football or something like that. But it probably has been a solid year since I sat down and watched a hockey game from start to finish. And actually, that was live. I was in Ithaca to watch Cornell play Harvard. So, that's a humongous rivalry up in this neck of the woods.
Absolutely. And I won't hold you to it, but you get any predictions on who's going to win the cup this year? We got an exciting one going on, right? It was 3-0. Now the Edmonton's battle back 3-2, so we're going to see what happens tonight. But any predictions?
I'm starting to feel like there may be, I'm not going to say choke, but a little bit of tightness going on, and that
Yeah.
this series may be Edmonton's to take.
Well, you're here to hear first, boys and girls. Well, not first, but hey, we
Which means
can't
it's
watch.
which
Pardon?
means it's going to end in game 6. So
Well, there you go. And that could be tonight. That could be tonight. A question I'd like to ask you as we're talking here, because everybody knows, currently in music, there's a big talk about how hard it is for artists to get paid, and with the streaming services and the way that there's access to product now. is that a challenge in your industry? Is there a Spotify for a Spotify challenge for writers type thing? Is that something that you guys face?
Well, Spotify is actually in the audiobooks business right now, and they have 10 of my audiobooks, I believe. Yes, the entire Wolf-like series. And I believe they have their sights set on becoming the audiobook provider to the world. They've got a lot of catching up to do to catch up to Audible and Amazon. But you I know plenty of authors are very disheartened by both the payment structure that Audible and Spotify provide. There really isn't the type of payoff for the authors. After we pay our editors and pay our narrators, and then the companies take such a large piece of the pie. The commission doesn't really make it very worthwhile for us. Now, the commissions on Kindle books, ebooks, are a lot better. I pull between 60 and 70%, depending whether or not I'm dealing with a Barnes and Noble or an Amazon. So that's actually a pretty good deal. There's also subscription sites starting up, which is very similar to the Spotify model. And so you've got Kindle Unlimited, which is by far the most established of all of them. Kobo has one now. I'm sure that the others will become a lot larger too as the days progress. But the payout for authors and that is also not nearly as high as the commission that we get from just a straight out download or sale. So yeah, there are challenges there, and it puts a lot of pressure on authors in the industry. And I know there's going to be a lot of pushback, but I also see the parallels and see what musicians have gone through. And sure, there are a ton of musicians out there who say, Spotify doesn't pay us enough, Apple Music doesn't pay us enough. This isn't fair, but they keep their music on those streaming platforms because so much money comes out of them, even if it's not a fair price for them. So I just don't see it going away, unfortunately. And as much as I would love to see a better payout, I've seen this in the world of stock photography. I've seen it in a lot of other industries where, once a company gets a foothold and becomes dominant in their industry, and you now have, multiple dominant players, especially Amazon and ours, you just don't see change because they're too powerful.
Right. I'll tell you, an artist that I'm working with, we chose to because of something that happened with Spotify. We're not pushing the platform at all. People are still going there, but we've been focusing on YouTube, and you can actually see right when we focused on YouTube, the views going like this, and it actually has had some pretty advantageous results. So it is interesting, and that whole pivot thing, you have to do it. So it's always an ever changing fun business. So, last question, Dan, because I know you want to enjoy some of that beautiful day down there. Where can my viewers, my watchers, find out about you? So, and I told you in the email that I sent you, Her Last Breath was the one that I get turned on to, and I just go and I do my research, and it's going to take me a long time to go through the whole catalog. But where can my viewers find out about you?
Well, if you search my name on Amazon, it's Dan Padavona, Padavona. You'll certainly find me there, but even more so, I encourage everybody to go to danpadavona.com. That's all put together in one word. And if you look at the top right corner of the screen, you'll see a nice, bright, bold yellow letters, free book. Just click on that and you can download a free thriller onto your Kindle or your Nook or even as PDF, however you like to read. You can even put it on your phone. And this is an opportunity for readers to get to know my style and see if I'm right for them. I write a lot of really dark thrillers, and for some people, it gets a little bit too intense. But it's a great way to find out if my books are right for you. And again, if you're in Kindle Unlimited too, uh, you can test my books for free, as I have my entire thriller series are all in Kindle Unlimited, at least for now.
Fantastic. Dan, I want to thank you for doing this, man. It's been a pleasure. I like I say, I stumbled on your your works. Kind of, a friend of mine that was giving me a hard time about not doing enough reading handed me the book, and I'm glad that he did. So thank you so much. And, I'd like to stay in touch with you, man, because like I say, as artists and people that are trying to compete in the arts, we need to support each other.
Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate, any time that somebody brings me on, but this has been a great podcast.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, sir.
You too, sir.